Good day, grade 11, and welcome to our virtual tourism classroom. This is the first time that we have met on this platform, so I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Penny Vosloo, and I am a tourism teacher in the Nelson Mandela Bay district. The lady that has compiled these PowerPoints for these lessons is the subject advisor for tourism in the Nelson Mandela Bay district for Zone 1, Erica Ferreira. And a big thank you to Erica for all her hard work in compiling the PowerPoints for these lessons, as well as a big thank you to the Eastern Cape Department of Education, the E-Teaching and Learning Directorate. They are responsible for making this happen. Before we start grade 11, I'm just going to remove myself from the screen so that we can not miss out on any of the nice images that you will see. Right, now we can continue. You will see coming up on your screen at the moment is an extract from your curriculum, and today we will be studying the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy, and the abbreviation there, DTGS. That is the theme of today's lesson, and also for the next lesson will be based on the same topic. Just so that you know, these bulleted parts of your curriculum that you see on the screen in front of you will be done during these two lessons. They will not necessarily be done in this order. We will also be taking a look at these bullets in a different order, but we will definitely be covering all of them. All right, if we can just look at the heading there, we've got Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy 2012 to 2020. That Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy is still relevant and only expires at the end of 2020, at the end of this year, and entails the following. The first thing that we will be having a look at is the state of domestic tourism in South Africa. Thereafter, we will look and see why we require a domestic tourism growth strategy. We won't be looking at any statistics, only the problem statement and the vision of the 2012 to 2020 domestic tourism growth strategy. We will also spend a little bit of time looking at current trends that influence tourism. Thereafter, we will look at the domestic marketing campaign. We'll also, during these two lessons, take a look at the 5 domestic market segments. We won't be looking at the percentage that is required, but we will be looking at the profile of the segment, why those people travel or perhaps do not travel, and also the type of holiday that they prefer. And finally, we will also be looking at the 4 strategic objectives and targets of the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy, as well as the implementation plan to meet these objectives. If we then can start our lesson for today, I would like to give you a little bit of background first, before we continue. Government decided that it was necessary to do research into the state of domestic tourism in South Africa, and that National Tourism Sector Strategy was approved by Cabinet and thereafter led to the development of the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy that we will be studying in this lesson and the following lesson. As domestic tourism is seen as an essential contributor to the growth of the tourism economy in South Africa. This report, the performance report, was released in 2011, and there were many aspects that were listed in the report, but we are only going to take a look at 3 of those aspects in this lesson that we're doing today. Firstly, we have a decline in the number of domestic trips. In other words, we've got fewer South Africans traveling in South Africa. Secondly, VFR was the main purpose of taking a domestic trip. VFR, visit friends and relatives, which meant that people were traveling not to stay in hotels and guest houses and bed and breakfasts, but they were staying with their families. And the third aspect that came from this performance report was that the most common activities for holiday travelers were shopping, social activities, visiting natural attractions and beaches, as well as nightlife. So if we look at that, we could see what South Africans were interested in, but there's also room for improvement, and we could expand our horizons and develop new tourism products to satisfy the needs and wants and preferences of the domestic market. We look at the problem statement. Why a domestic tourism growth strategy? It became evident from the report that a strategy was necessary because not many South Africans had had the opportunity or the desire to travel in their own country. And various reasons were given for this, and those are listed on your screen at the moment. Firstly, a limited income and therefore cannot afford to travel. Another reason given why South Africans had not had the opportunity or desire to travel was that they had no reason to travel. There was no purpose for them to go traveling. Time constraints, they didn't have any time, unemployment, and also dislike of travel. If we continue, we will see that the following emanated from the report: that firstly, there is a lack of travel culture amongst South Africans, particularly amongst previously disadvantaged communities, as a result of a limited awareness of tourism. The second bullet that emanated there is that in certain areas in South Africa, there's limited development of tourism products. So we could make more products available in the various areas of South Africa. And the third bullet on your screen, domestic tourism is also not contributing to the GDP at the desired level. Let me just stop there and explain to you what the GDP stands for, Gross Domestic Product. Now, the gross domestic product is the total value of goods and services produced in a country within a year, and is known to be an indicator of growth in the economy of the country. If we take a look at the domestic tourism growth strategy vision, that comes up on your screen right at the bottom. But before we take a look at that, let's just unpack the word vision. A vision is a description of what you would like to achieve or accomplish in a mid or long-term future. So it is something that you want to accomplish. The domestic tourism growth strategy vision is therefore, at the bottom of your screen, growing domestic tourism for a sustainable tourism economy. Now, let's just unpack that vision quickly. Growing domestic tourism means, in our case, encouraging South Africans to travel within South Africa. Why? Because we want to sustain the tourism economy. Now, if you take a look at the word sustainable, if something is sustainable, you want it to continue to exist. So it must be there over a long period of time. Therefore, the vision of the domestic tourism growth strategy is to encourage South Africans to travel within South Africa, because we want the tourism economy to continue to be there for a long time. I hope that's an easy way of understanding the vision of the domestic tourism growth strategy. All right, if we take a look at current trends that influence tourism, and if I can just draw your attention to the fact that the trends that you will see coming up on your screen are actually the current trends. They're the up-to-date ones. These are not the trends that were evident in the 2011 research that was done. And over the years, there has been a certain amount of change. Let's just make sure we understand the word trend. A trend is a general development or change in a situation or in the way that people are behaving. I'll read it again. A general development or change in a situation or in the way that people are behaving. So it is a change in the behavior or in the situation over a period of time. 3 current trends that have been observed as having an impact on the growth potential of the domestic market are coming up on your screen shortly. Let me just unpack that sentence there. The trends, in other words, the developments, the current ones that have had an impact on the growth potential of the domestic market. In other words, the potential for growth, the potential for South Africans to travel within South Africa. That is what we're looking at here. The first trend that has become evident is that specifically related to the travel industry. And in South Africa, the trend has been that people have been traveling more, but for shorter holidays. Therefore, the trend has been increased and frequent shorter holidays. There's also been an increased use of new technology, such as booking channels and marketing, for example, social media. If you take a look at the right-hand side of your screen, those are all platforms through which a person who would like to travel can either get information about bookings or accommodation, or whether it be to find out about the accommodation establishment. And those platforms are used by various people that are wanting to book their accommodation or make their travel arrangements. There is, in the past, that person would perhaps have gone to a travel agent and got the information, and more people are using new technology and finding out and making their bookings on their own. The following trend that has come up that is influencing tourism is that of technology. And we've got various disruptive technologies listed on the screen at the moment. Uber. You all know Uber is where it's like a taxi, but you contact the Uber driver and he or she will come and collect you at your place that you need to be picked up, and then drop you off, and you pay the required fee. Airbnb is also a disruptive technology. Airbnb entails a person that has accommodation, has available rooms in his or her house and makes them available on the Airbnb platform for people to make bookings and stay in their accommodation at their house. And then you also have couch surfing. Couch surfing is an initiative whereby you can sit on your couch, surf the net, and find accommodation in the home of somebody in a different area of your country, or for that matter, in a different area of the world. And then you will go and stay at that person's house. It's free. It's obviously important to bring a gift, take a gift for that person, and also interact with the person. That person may offer you a couch. You may even have your own room. And that is a wonderful way to find out about the country. The third trend that has become evident is the social trend. And that entails two things. The first one is the shift in domestic travel demographics. Let me just unpack that a little bit before we continue with that bullet. Domestic travel, we all know what that is. South Africans traveling within South Africa. And demographics refers to the people involved in the travel, as well as where they come from and their background. So if you read that bullet, shifting domestic travel demographics due to growing black middle class, it means that in South Africa there is a growing black middle class which is changing the demographics, which is changing the profile of domestic travel. And another social trend, and we are all experiencing that at the moment, risk of diseases and pandemics. You will see at the bottom of your screen, although it was never in South Africa, Ebola had a huge effect on travel, and even to a greater degree, the coronavirus, COVID-19, also a huge effect on travel. Now, the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy 2012 to 2020 had 4 strategic objectives, and those are listed on the screen at the moment. The first strategic objective, before we look at the objective, let's just make sure we understand the term a strategic objective. An objective is something that you want to attain. You want to reach that whatever is on the screen at the moment. And the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy identified 4 specific things that they wanted to attain as a result of the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy. The first one was an increase in domestic tourism revenue or income. Let's unpack that. It means that the objective that was identified as part of the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy is that more income, more money must be generated through domestic tourism. The second one, directly below that on your screen, you will see says to increase domestic tourism volume. Now that word volume means to increase the number of domestic tourists traveling in South Africa. In other words, to have more South Africans traveling within South Africa. The third one on the right-hand side of your screen, you will see reads as follows: to improve measures and efforts aimed at addressing seasonality and equitable or fair geographic spread. Now, in order to understand that, I think let's just unpack that, because there's some words there that could be a little bit problematic. The two words that the two terms I'm referring to is, the one is seasonality, the second one is geographic spread. Seasonality means that people travel or go on holiday in specific seasons, at specific times of the year. You know, us as South Africans, we generally are traveling in the December school holidays, during January when the weather is nice, and you know that over the Easter weekend a huge number of people travel as well. So that is seasonality. The second term that could be a little bit problematic there is fair geographic spread. Now, if you look at the two words geographic spread, that means that the strategy wants to encourage people not to go to the same destination every time they go on holiday. So if you take the Eastern Cape as an example, somebody from East London would go to Port Elizabeth year after year after year. What the domestic tourism growth strategy is encouraging, that instead of doing that, travel right throughout the Eastern Cape. Travel to the Hogsback area, travel to the Allowal North area, visit various regions of our province. So that third bullet speaks to improving measures and efforts. So improving strategies, making sure that we encourage South Africans to travel right throughout the year and travel to different parts of the country. I hope that explains that bullet quite sufficiently. And then the fourth one on your screen at the moment is to enhance the level of the culture of travel and tourism amongst South Africans. If you remember right at the beginning of the lesson, we said that there used to be no culture of travel amongst South Africans, or a large percentage of our population, and so the domestic tourism growth strategy wants to increase the culture of travel amongst South Africans. What you will see coming up on your screen for the next couple of slides is specifically the strategic objective, which was the 4 that I had on the screen in the previous slide, and that will come up on the left-hand side of your screen each time. And then the middle section of your screen will give you information about targets. How are we going to obtain that strategic objective that is given there? So as I said earlier, our first strategic objective is to increase domestic tourism revenue, in other words, to make more money out of domestic tourism. And how do we go about that? Improving our operations, attractions, and offerings. So I would suggest perhaps an upgrade of a tourism attraction. I would also suggest improving the level of service, or the standard of service, at a specific tourist attraction, which will improve the number of visitors and also therefore increase the amount of money that they spend. The second target given on your screen is to make the best use of existing products and introduce new products. Now, what is a tourism product? A tourism product is anything from a hotel to a facility like the boardwalk or a national park, anything that is available for tourists to make use of. So that bullet is talking to making the best use of our existing products. So the products that we do have, the boardwalk, Addo, the hotel, the beachfront in East London, any of those, we want to make the best use of those products and make sure that they are fully utilized. And at the same time, if we want to increase the amount of money made from domestic tourism, we also have to consider introducing new products. If we then continue, you will see that the next target is to increase business travel volume. And there are two strategies here that could be considered. And the first one is pre-tour, and the second one is post-tour. And this is not only relevant for business travel, it is also relevant for sports tours. Now, what a pre- and post-tour entails is, let us say somebody goes traveling for a week and stays, is they traveling for business purposes. The target here is to encourage that person that to, instead of only staying for the required amount of time, to rather have a pre-tour. In other words, go earlier and spend some more time in the area that your business trip is going to be, or on the other hand, stay a little longer afterwards and finish your business trip and then have a post-tour. In other words, spend an extra few days in that area. The same refers to sports tours. If somebody traveling to Port Elizabeth to take part in the Ironman would perhaps come a week earlier to enjoy the sights and what is available in Port Elizabeth, or stay longer afterwards to enjoy what the city has to offer. The last target that refers to the first strategic objective is to establish a culture of travel. For example, improve the performance of tourist information centres. And on your right-hand side, you'll see an excellent example of a tourist information centre. And that bullet speaks to improving the level of performance. In other words, excellent service delivery, with the staff members friendly, knowledgeable, and able to assist the domestic tourists that require help with bookings or information. Our second strategic objective is to increase tourism, domestic tourism volume. In other words, what we want to do here is to encourage more South Africans to tour in South Africa. And the target here is to provide different packaging of affordable tourism products. If I can read from the screen, it says to introduce a domestic travel card to encourage travel through discounted packages. Unfortunately, this target that was decided on as part of the domestic tourism growth strategy did not come to light, the domestic travel card, but I can explain it to you by telling you about sandparks that have a wild card, and that you will see on the right-hand side of the screen. South African national parks have what is termed as a wild card. You'll also see my green card, which when bought entitles the owner of the card to enter the national park at a discounted rate. So instead of paying, let's say, 100 Rand, they would pay less money to enter the park. And the plan with the domestic tourism growth strategy was that a domestic travel card would be brought out. So a person that bought the domestic travel card would be given accommodation or entrance at different attractions at a discounted rate. The following strategic objective was the one that we unpacked so that we understood it fully. That was the one that spoke to addressing seasonality and fair geographic spread. Let me just remind you here what that meant. Seasonality is traveling right through the year, and fair geographic spread is traveling right throughout the country. So let's just take that whole strategic objective and put it into a simpler sentence: to have ways in place that help South Africans to travel right throughout the year and travel right throughout South Africa as well. Now, if we look at the target that we have here, make the best use, and specifically is all year round, of existing tourism assets or facilities. For example, create special activities for less visited areas and also for low season. Let me draw your attention to the advert on the right-hand side from the Table Mountain Cableway. There is a sunset special there, and if you look at the bottom of that advert, half price for locals. So that means that domestic tourists are being encouraged to make use of Table Mountain Cableway because they're giving a discounted price. So that is an effort to increase the number of people that visit the Table Mountain Cableway. The following one on your screen: make use of different marketing strategies. Example, set up provincial marketing offices in other provinces. That means that the Eastern Cape Tourism would have a marketing office in the Western Cape, and Western Cape Tourism would have a marketing office perhaps in KZN, and KZN would have a marketing office in Gauteng, and that is to encourage people to travel so that they can, and it assists them to be able to get information much easier than having to phone around. And it also creates an awareness if the potential traveller sees the provincial marketing office of a different province in their hometown. The final strategic objective is to enhance the level of the culture of travel and tourism amongst South Africans. The target there, the first one, is to develop and implement tourism awareness education programs. So it is about creating an awareness of tourism and also about teaching people about tourism. Then you'll see the following bullet speaks to enhanced training of tourism product owners. Remember what we said a product owner was? It is somebody who owns a hotel or an attraction or a guest house or a bed and breakfast. So enhance the training of those product owners, their employees, and neighbouring communities. Now I want to draw your attention to the right-hand side of your screen, where there are two specific campaigns that have been undertaken by South African Tourism. The first one is We Do Tourism, that is their domestic tourism campaign. The second one, Certified South African Specialist. Now this, in grade 10, you might have learnt about the Fundi program that was part of South African Tourism's measures to encourage people to learn about the country, but not only just you and me, specifically people who would be a travel agent or a tour guide, gaining that qualification so that they could tell other people about what was on offer in the various provinces. So those two targets are about creating an awareness, teaching people, and improving the training given to the people who have to take other people or inform other people about different attractions in the province or in the country. Right, grade 11, now we're going to take a little bit of time to study some activities that have come up in past exam papers. The first one comes from the November 29 Eastern Cape examination paper and says study the information on domestic tourism and answer the questions. There you have been given a statement. A survey of domestic tourism has revealed that the majority of South Africans are not travelling in their own country. List 2 reasons in support of the above finding. Now, what I'd like to do when we're looking at activities is encourage you to think of your own answers here. Don't wait for the answers to come up on the screen, but consider what you would give as an answer at this stage. So, why are South Africans not travelling in their own country? You are to give 2 reasons. The first one is that they cannot afford to travel, they have no reason to travel, they have no time to travel, or they dislike travel. They perhaps are unemployed, they don't have a travel culture, there's limited product development, and another issue could perhaps be concerns over safety and security. Now, if you were paying attention right throughout this lesson, you would have noticed that those bullets that were given as part of the memo came up earlier in this presentation. The next question comes from November 2015, the Eastern Cape question paper. The diagram below shows the main objectives labelled A to D of the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy 2012 to 2020. Listed below the diagram are actions that have been identified by the National Department of Tourism to meet these objectives. Match the objective with the most appropriate action listed below. The instruction there is to write only the letter A to D next to the question number. So if we take a look at what is on the screen at the moment, those are the 4 objectives of the Domestic Tourism Growth Strategy. We've seen them a number of times in this presentation. To increase domestic tourism revenue, to increase domestic tourism volume, to improve measures and efforts aimed at addressing seasonality and equitable geographic spread, and the last one, to enhance the level of the culture of travel amongst South Africans. Now, what you are given is a number of actions, and you are instructed to match the actions on the left-hand side of your screen with the objectives on the right-hand side of your screen. Let's read through these actions. 8.1.1, introduce affordable tourism products to increase the number of domestic tourism trips. Develop and introduce tourism awareness education programs in order to increase understanding of tourism and appreciation of the value of tourism. 8.1.3, improve levels of domestic tourism marketing by establishing provincial marketing offices in other provinces to create interprovincial partnerships and cross-selling across provinces. And 8.1.4, encourage the improvement of attractions, operations and offerings to increase the use of tourism facilities and to ensure that there is a sufficient supply of products and services for each market segment. Now, what you are required to do is match any of those 8.1.1 down to 8.1.4 with the objectives A, B, C, and D on the right-hand side. So I hope you've been thinking about it while I've been reading through those, because I'm going to show you the answers on the screen, and I certainly hope that you got the answers right. I hope so. If we look at the following question, that's a 2017 Eastern Cape question paper. A survey of domestic tourism has revealed the least popular month for leisure travel in South Africa is May, while the most popular month for leisure travel is December. Give one reason why domestic tourists prefer to travel in December, and I'm sure you're going to get that one right. It's obviously because of the school holidays and the weather at that time of the year. The following question: identify one strategic objective of the domestic tourism growth strategy that specifically aims to address the less popular months for leisure travel amongst domestic tourists. Now, we've had that one come up time and time again in this lesson, and I'm sure you've been able to identify it as well. It is to improve measures and efforts aimed at addressing seasonality. The final question for today's lesson: explain 2 ways in which the domestic tourism growth strategy aims to achieve the objective identified in 8.2.2. So there we have the objective is to improve measures and efforts, and how does the domestic tourism growth strategy aim to achieve that objective? By maximizing all year-round use of existing tourism assets, implementing differentiated marketing, creating special activities for less visited areas and low seasons, and then also providing support for 1 mega event hosting per province during low season and in less visited provinces. You should remember those number of those coming up during the lesson that we've had today. Right, that brings us to the end of today's lesson, grade 11. I certainly hope that you have learned something, that you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you again in the following lesson, which is the second half of the domestic tourism growth strategy. Goodbye.